we have problems. We're humans. There's never going to be a utopia where problems are going to be absent. But we got to figure out how to work through problems and how to solve them. So what the math definitely enables you to do is learn problem solving as a skill, and it's a very transferable skill into any and every aspect of your existence. So that's why math is black, because we're black people, and we have a lot of problems that we need to solve, and we have used math to solve a lot of our problems. Whether it was what's the best route that we're going to take to run away from this plantation, or and get up to the north. How are we going to map that out? How are we going to plan that? Are we going to do the different routes in somebody's cornrows or whatever? All of that is mathematical. Everything we do is mathematical.
You need to write that last part.
Everything we do is mathematical?
Well, no, the part about like how it was used to figure out the routes of where you were going to go and how you were going. I mean, it literally led to your liberation.
It is Freedom Friday, and you are still not free.
It's another Freedom Friday, and you're still not free, but hopefully you will be free after this hour where we talk about math in Black History Month. Black to the Future. We have a great guest with us today, Akil Parker, who is known to be a math all-star. He really believes in it. And, I might start to believe in it at some point if I keep talking to this brother. But, I feel like it's going to take a few more episodes for that to happen. And Sharif El-Mecki, we got you here too, brother. Appreciate to see you again. Happy New Year. Thank you for being back. I want to talk about right now in the world that we are in. There's so much going on and it feels like we're losing ground. But one thing will always remain consistent, which is math is always going to be math. Education is still going to be education. And there's never going to be a time where we don't need it. But I would love to talk right now today. We're in the political whirlwind that we're in right now, how we get some grounding about what matters and make sure we keep pushing forward with getting us, our kids, the education that they need. And math is one of those things we push to the side a lot. We talk a lot about reading, talk a lot about other forms, history, social studies, ethnic studies, all important stuff. But I feel like many of us want to walk around that math bush and just kind of look at it and be like, yeah, I'm going to keep going. So Akil, thank you, brother. Welcome to the show. And I would just love to, first of all, where I want to start with this is, it's kind of not just about math. I just want to do a brother check. What are you making of the state of the world that we're in right now? How are you grounding yourself just in this minute beyond the math, teaching, and educating stuff? What are you doing for your mind right now to be grounded in this moment?
Well, the way the world is right now reminds me of the phrase that if you stay ready, you don't got to get ready. So, this, I think there's I have a very optimistic view. I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think that there's always been work to be done. But I think just now with the current leadership, they're much more unapologetic and more vocal and, overt as opposed to being covert. Like other types of leaderships may have been more covert about what they were doing. Like these guys are just putting it out on Front Street. Like, listen, this is what we about to do. This is going to happen. Now, what are you going to do? So I think what that does, it gives us an opportunity to, gain numbers, of people that may be more willing to participate in like organizing and movement activity that previously wouldn't, because they might have said, well, no, things really aren't that bad, because they're not able to visually see, on the news media or on social media how bad things actually are. But now you can see it. So it's kind of like, like what Fanon say, once you're exposed to the truth, you only have two choices. You can either affirm it or like lie to yourself and act like it's not the truth. So now it's like things are being exposed. And, so that, more people, I think, will inevitably, step up and start making moves. And the people that were already making moves will just continue to make moves. So
yeah, Sharif, I'm optimistic. I appreciate, optimistic is not the word I would use right now. So I appreciate talking to you this morning, brother. Like, listen, I need that in my life. And Sharif, one thing I'll add in my question to you about the same thing. It's the same question, really, how you ground yourself in this moment right now. But these fools are like, they are deleting entire bodies of work right now at the science work that has been done with research studies, history things, stuff from the National Archives. They're like hitting the delete button. So in terms of like a national memory and a memory of us, I don't think we've ever had a time where it's more important for us to make sure we're good archivists and good like keepers of our own knowledge. How are you thinking about that, and what's our role? Like what should we be doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, but this goes back to, just the Nguza Saba and self-determination. And, we have to always name ourselves, define ourselves, speak for ourselves, and archive for ourselves. I mean, this is a technological book burning that they've been promising, that they've tried to do for many years, right? When we're talking about like hidden history, that's why I'm so grateful for. As much as I poo-poo technology, I'm also super grateful for folks like y'all who use it as a platform to teach. Because Mama used to say, everywhere's a classroom. And she used to say that before the technology arrived to literally make everywhere a classroom. So we are, I think, grateful for all the folks who are using it to continue to archive, but also continue to teach. And I think that piece is so critical, that we not rely on, Library of Congress and anywhere else. Like, great, we want to push them to have it. And if we're only relying on that, we're always going to be behind the eight ball, because it's just all you need is 70 plus million Americans to say F all of that. We don't want it, and you get somebody else. So, and I think the other side that's most frustrating to me about all of this is, very aligned to what, Parker said, is like, stay ready. Like, the amount of people who sat on their laurels after Obama, the amount of, post-racial, the first person I heard talk about that was a Black person. And I was like, wait a minute, like, that means you haven't studied history. Like, wait a minute, during Reconstruction, didn't you have Black politicians? And like, to me, it was like so clear that people had been bamboozled and hoodwinked and everything else that, Malcolm said in that speech. Because I'm just like, why are y'all so comfortable? And this is separate from the nap ministry and taking a break and resting. And it's different than that. Even that, you still have to stay woke. Even as you're resting, you still got to remain awake, as, Dr. King talked about. Like, don't fall asleep during this time. That time hasn't stopped, So even as we're resting, we still have to be aware of what's happening. And I think, and then the second part of that, just the white lash, right? So we know, whoa, we should have been getting ready as soon as he got elected to say, like, all right, white lash is coming. And you saw it, right? Like, we see it clear as day. So, one step forward. Normally we say two steps back, but it would be, if we're not careful, it'd be like 100 steps back. And then how do we, continue? But then I'd say the third part of that is continue to build community. Your hat says it all: organize and community, inward. And that should always happen, but it has to bring even a higher level of urgency of how we do that, particularly for our children. Because remember, in 4 years, that ninth grader will be a 12th grader. And that's what I keep thinking about. The ninth grader will be a 12th grader. What does it mean for this entering adulthood with the next 4 years? How do we position the youth to be fully human, to have aspirations, to have the tools and armor in the midst of the next? So that's also what I'm thinking about. You're talking about like this Afrofuturism. Like, all right, let's make sure we're centering our youth in this, because they're going to be older. They're growing up in the midst of this. So what does that mean? And I think we just got to pay a lot of attention to it.
In times like this, when things get so confusing, to me, it's all about fundamentals. Like, if you're in any sport or any game or in chess, if you feel like you're getting lost, you always go back to the fundamentals and you rely on the fundamentals. And when it comes to education or Black education or whatever we're talking about right now, my question would be like, what are the fundamentals? Like, because that's the safety valve you turn on when you're in confusing times. If you go back to your in golf or anything, if you just go back to your fundamentals and you know what you're doing, it makes sense. So, Akil, when it comes to math, we're in a crazy time. I believe that Black History Month is it's in. I've been saying this for about 4 or 5 years. It's in real need for some redoing. And the fundamentals, one big part of the fundamentals is math, because you can't build a world without it. Can't build a world without science. Can't build a family without any of these things. So the building blocks of Egypt and other places, for instance, and Kush, and if we keep going down the line, it's a continuation of math and science throughout the earliest people until now. And he who has the most of it wins. So can you make a case for why is math Black? Right? What do Black people have to do with math? Help me make this case to people.
Everything. I mean, we're the original humans. And as you said, you can't maintain or develop a civilization without mathematics, without being able to quantify, information and data around you. And it's not just really the quantification, but just, a lot of times we don't really have a full understanding of what math really is. I mean, math is critical thinking. Math is problem solving. Math is being able to recognize contradictions in nature and being able to recognize patterns. Like, okay, every time I do this, every time I eat this food, it makes my stomach feel a certain way. And then you say, okay, well, let me stop eating that food. If I don't want my stomach to feel that certain way, you've recognized the pattern. So essentially, like you're using, that's mathematical thinking and mathematical reasoning. But math is black, because so many it's well documented, how black people, whether in the United States and even before the United States, before the Mayafa, were excelling in mathematics and creating and discovering and recognizing mathematical patterns, and which became formulas and algorithms that we use on a regular basis. And and even a lot of us, to the brother and sister on the street or on the corner, we're using math and using algebra all the time without even knowing it, because of how math has been propagandized and marketed to us as if it's something that's abstract and only in a textbook in a classroom. We don't realize how much algebra we're actually doing on an ongoing basis, whether it's trying to figure out, do I have enough gas in my car to get here? Or when do I got to go put gas in my tank? Do I have enough money to go grocery shopping and pay my PGW bill or my PICO bill? And all these different types of calculations that we do, figuring out what the check should be, at the restaurant or whatever. Are we going to split the check, or is it going to be one check, and how are we going to do that? All that we're doing algebra all the time. And we just don't realize it. That's just because of how it's been marketed to us. And there's nothing coincidental or accidental about the way it's been marketed to us, because it really is the gatekeeper for so many opportunities, whether it's in the STEM disciplines or it's in business disciplines, finance, accounting, just a lot of different things. And again, it's really about problem solving, and the same part of your brain that we use, or the same, methods that we may use in a geometry class in 10th grade, or algebra 2 class in 11th grade, or algebra 1 class in 9th grade. We're going to use those, for solving everyday problems, in our future when we become adults, whether it's interpersonal problems with a loved one or a significant other or a supervisor at a job or somebody in traffic or somebody at the DMV or PennDOT or wherever you're trying to get your license renewed. And, we have problems, we're humans. There's never going to be a utopia where problems are going to be absent, but we got to figure out how to work through problems and how to solve them. So what the math definitely enables you to do is learn problem solving as a skill. And it's a very transferable skill into any and every aspect of your existence. So that's why math is black, because, we're black people, and we have a lot of problems that we need to solve. And we have used math to solve a lot of our problems, whether it was, what's the best route that we're going to take to, run away from this plantation, or, and get up to the north. How are we going to map that out? How are we going to plan that? Are we going to do the different routes in somebody's cornrows or whatever? All of that is mathematical. Everything we do is mathematical.
You need to write that last part.
Everything we do is mathematical?
Well, no, the part about like how it was used to figure out the routes of where you were going to go and how you were going. I mean, it literally led to your liberation. Like literally,
Definitely.
had to do the patterns of your liberation. Since it's Black History Month, who would you point us to in terms of milestones and important people that, like, if I wanted to teach my kids a little bit about why math is in us and we come from it, what eras or what would I put in that lesson plan to teach kids about our milestones and people?
I mean, it had to be. I mean, that's a whole year course. more than a lesson plan. It's like 1,000 lessons. But
y'all gonna do this with me at Educators all the time. I'm not playing with y'all. I'm not playing with y'all right now. That's not a rubric. That's a graphic organizer. I'm not doing that with y'all right now. I'm not doing that with y'all.
He take all of it and put it in this. It's too much. How much time you got?
Yeah. I mean,
maybe it's multiple. Year course then. All right.
I could drop some names. For you.
Yeah,
we can go back. We can go back to Imhotep and ancient Kemet. We can go back to the sister Hypatia in Kemet, Heron. I need to do some more research on Heron, because they claim that Heron was Greek, but yet sources say that he lived in Alexandria, which was in Egypt, or Kemet. And then coming forward, there's people like Sundiata Acoli. I would talk about Sundiata Acoli. because Sundiata Acoli, while, a member of the Black Liberation Army, along with Assata Shakur and Zaid Malik Shakur, rest in peace to Zaid Malik Shakur, who was assassinated on the New Jersey Turnpike back in '73 when they tried to kill Assata also. He was a mathematics major at HBCU, Prairie View A&M University down in Houston, Texas. And, so I would talk about him because then that makes a connection, because it's like, okay, we can talk about mathematics, we can talk about mathematics exemplars such as him, but also like what was their political and cultural orientation? Like they took the math, and I'm sure because of his math background, it made sense to him that, okay, I need to be more revolutionary. Similar to like an Amilcar Cabral, who studied agricultural engineering, and then led PAIGC in their fight against the Portuguese. So people like that, Dr. Abdul Alim Shabazz, who attended Lincoln University and later taught at Lincoln University, and taught at, I believe he taught at Tuskegee, taught at Southern University, and at one point he has the distinction of being the late Dr. Shabazz, having taught the most Black math PhDs in this nation. Real solid, important brother. Dr. Gloria Gilmer, speaking of the patterns in the cornrows and whatnot, she did a lot of work. She's a sister that was from Baltimore, where I grew up. And she did a lot of work with the tessellations and the geometric patterns in cornrows and braids and Black hairstyles. So, you got people like that. Of course, like Evelyn Granville Boyd and, Dr. David Blackwell, Albert Baruka Turner. The list goes on. And there's actually a documentary. This is a shameless plug, but it's a documentary.
That's why it's not one lesson plan.
Yeah, exactly. Like, go on and do it. There's a documentary on PBS airing throughout this month across the country called Journeys of Black Mathematicians that speaks to a lot of these historical figures, these Black people, that were educated at historically Black colleges and later taught at historically Black colleges and taught mathematics.
Is this on PBS, you said?
Yes, on PBS. It's airing, at different times throughout the country.
That's why they're trying to shut down PBS. See, that's why they're trying to shut it down now. They're taking its funding away from it right now. Sharif, you ran a school. You dealt with kids every day, and by dealt with, I don't mean like dealt with, but I mean you had to be a problem solver in watching them on their learning journey. And like I said, we talk about reading and literacy and all that type of stuff. As a school leader, and you had to look at. I know you turned the school around. Let me see if I get it right. You turned the school around from being terrible to being blue chip. I don't know. I'm making stuff up as I'm talking right now. I'm just making stuff up right now. I'm making up designations. But anyways, part of that has to be the math part of it. What did you notice and learn about how our kids, how they are experiencing that part of their education, the math part, and what has to be done for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple of things. One, helping them connect the dots to, like, as Akil said, like, what they're naturally doing. And not just like, oh, mathematics is only learned in this chair, in this building, like, so how Parker described it as far as like, because I used to have kids like, I'm not a math person. I'm not good at math. And I'm just, what I mean? I used to fuss at some adults who used to say that as well.
Yes,
just like, I'm like, okay. So then I would juxtapose that. Like, how would I sound if I said, I ain't no problem solver. I ain't doing that. They're like, that sounds crazy. I'm like, all right, well, it's the same thing. That's what you're saying. That's what I hear. That's what you're communicating. Not just to me, but most importantly, that's what you're communicating to yourself. Right. And so to me, like, how you speak to yourself about yourself is a critical part of not just spirituality, but also just your mental capacity to then continue to achieve. So if you want to accelerate achievement, start looking at, and again, this is what good educators do. They help people connect the dots. They help people see what they can't necessarily see in themselves. I'm like, oh no, I'm not good at math. My response is like, well, I think you're a great problem solver. Well, I didn't say that. I said I'm not good at math. I'm like, yeah, I heard you. That's what I think you're a great problem solver, right? And then helping them to see, like, that's what math is, So in Iran, while you're taking math, you also start taking logic. Logic is math in words. So it's like, well, I'm not logical. I'm not right. Like, and so that to me is such an important part. And again, we talked right before the show, mindsets matter most. Your mindset matters the most about even how you see yourself as a problem solver. And that's what math is. It is around this idea of how do you wrap your brain around solving problems. both the seen and the unseen, right? We talked a long time ago about like algebra, like that Arabic term of, the unknown or the unseen. Like that's what this is about. And kids have it. The other thing and I can tell you, when I first came into teaching, before I even started teaching, I took some courses. So one, in college, an elective, a lot of my friends were taking just random courses. You had to take like you had to take some elective and stuff. I took algebra because I just enjoy math. I'm like, yeah, y'all taking art and this and that. I was like, I'm gonna sign up for the math course. It's just. But then later, when I became a teacher, I went back to that math professor and said, hey, can you give me a letter of recommendation? So that was one thing. But the other piece, I had to take a graduate class. And this is when I got scared for our children. So right before, so the summer before I started teaching, I started like, I had to get my master's and certifications. I started taking some courses at Cheney, CU. I was shocked with the questions that some of the present teachers who were also taking courses and taking this math, and they didn't know. They couldn't solve. And it was like hard for me as a 21-year-old to wrap my brain around. These are people who are leading classrooms right now and didn't understand basic mathematical principles and were struggling through the class. And I was just like, wait a minute, these are people who are trying to get into teaching, and they're like, no, I teach now. Like, wait a minute. Like, wow. You're in front of they were in front of elementary school students. So I think so both math, just how we talk about it, but then also there are a lot of people who are leading classrooms who are teaching math who don't know and understand math. So we're, a lot of times, I'm like, yes, we got to do more. And we also have to kind of backfill a lot of information, because I don't think people understand like how, and when we're talking about like Black children, brown children, poor children in particular, there are a lot of them who are not with mathematicians trying to learn math. And then we say, as they go through, as they progress and matriculate, we're like, why didn't they know this? Or why didn't they understand this? Because who was leading that classroom? And then also who prepared them to lead the classroom. We also have to scrutinize that as well.
I have so many broad questions to ask you all about this, because I'm thinking about it from kind of a civilian standpoint. But you think about a city like Baltimore, you have Bob Moses, who was a leader.
Yeah, that was the name. Yeah, Benjamin Banneker and Bob Moses were two of the folks that
I think the thing that I found interesting about Bob Moses was it was my first introduction to somebody who was in the thick of the history that I like to read about, the civil rights history, who took math on as a thing. Like I used to read about all these people, but then I got to him and it was like, wait, whoa, why is he? Yeah, what's this math thing? Like, why is he? I didn't really understood it, so I found that really different, like than all the other people I was reading about, and unique. But then he's a Baltimore all-star. They have the Baltimore Algebra Project, and then you have things that hit the news, like they had 20 schools that they didn't have a single child that was proficient in math in like 20 of their schools in Baltimore. Now, this is a very broad question to bring up, but like, how does that happen? How do we go backwards? Because I mean, it feels to me like if you look at history chronologically, we've been moving forward on a lot of things. I don't think we ever slid back type of thing in such a big way as we have. And I don't know what year I would put it at, but at some point that forward progress and commitment to moving forward in the academics, something started happening that was putting us back. And the outcome of that is this thing I'm bringing up. You look at Baltimore, a place that is renowned for somebody who's a civil rights leader who said, no, this is a Black subject. This is a subject for us. This is a liberation tool. I don't know where that went. So any help you brothers can give, I don't even know that's a question. I'm just bringing it up. It's one of the things I'll read it and I won't know much about like what's happening there.
I like to comment on that if I could. A couple of things come to mind. I think first and foremost, we always have to consider this Latin phrase that I throw around a lot, cui bono, meaning like who benefits. So whenever we think about like these large concentrations or percentages of students failing, whether it's in Baltimore, Philly, DC, Chicago, Detroit, wherever, we always have to look at like who's benefiting from that. Because if there are certain entities and people and corporations or government entities that are benefiting from it, then that means that there's going to be a lot of energy, financial resources, and time and put behind trying to ensure that outcome. right? So that's the one thing. We also have to think about the fact that like mathematics, especially, is a very cumulative subject. So what happens is, I mean, it's very likely that, I mean, because when I've taught all these like high school level math courses, like Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, Pre-Cal Stats, and all that, a lot of times the students that I taught that had the most significant issues, they didn't have issues with the current content or the current concepts. What they had issues with was a weak foundation because they didn't really ever learn arithmetic or learn it properly. Right. So it's like, somebody's in an Algebra 1 course, they're asked to solve an equation and they don't know their multiplication facts by heart. And people get mad at me when I talk about, our children needing to memorize multiplication facts, but there's no way around it. Like I'm a down that hill. Like kids need to memorize multiplication facts. Now, when I say that, I want to be clear in case this ends up being a clip somewhere, right? I want to be clear that I think there should be memorization by what I call memorization by consequence, meaning by consequence of them having done a whole lot of multiplication problems, understanding the concept of multiplication, understanding the connection between addition and multiplication, knowing that multiplication is just repeated addition, and also understanding the connection between multiplication and division. And from the exercise and the repetition of doing a lot of multiplication problems, then you just end up just like, oh, yeah, I know what that is. I know 9 times 8 is 72 off the top of my head. I don't even have to think about it because I did that work. So I was putting in the work, like in the trenches, like really doing these math problems like so much and so frequently, right? So, but I definitely think that is a significant issue, and that a lot of children have such a weak foundation. Like their foundation is just horrible. And also they're not, a lot of times you have teachers, right? Teachers that, as we mentioned, are not properly trained and don't know a lot of different ways to deliver that content, right? Because they may only know one way to teach multiplication. So if you're in a classroom with 25 different students and you got maybe 15 different learning styles, and maybe these 10 students over here might understand it better another way, but you're a teacher and you don't know that. If you know that other way, those 10 students, it's the blind leading the blind. They just out of luck, right? So that happens a whole lot. So it's like it's a combination of things, and then also I think we definitely have to have like a two-prong approach where we're like revamping the teacher education model when it comes to mathematics, and also we got to educate parents too, because a lot of people will be critical of parents and saying parents need to do this, parents need to do that, which is all true. However, they're not offering resources and methods to teach parents how to do the things that we know they need to do, which is why I created my YouTube channel and why I create the resources that I create, right? So that, parents can feel empowered and not feel nervous when their kids come home with that homework, where they're like, oh, okay, no, I know how to do this, right? So I feel like, let's sit down at this dining room table, this kitchen table, let's sit down on the couch or wherever we're going to sit down at, and let's go over these problems, because it's really not as hard as I thought it was. Yeah, it's different from how I learned it 30 years ago when I was in third grade, but so what? It's just a different way to do it. It's cool. It's all good, right? So we got to like figure that out too, because like a lot of stuff, schools are not really equipped to provide the level of education to be the sole educator, right? Schools, especially the way they're set up now, my belief and understanding is that schools need to be a space for practice, right? But if they're going to be a space for practice, like I'll say it this way, math class needs to be like recess. Children love recess in part because they get to practice the things that they like doing that they already learned in their neighborhood, on their block, around their way, in their hood or wherever. They get to come to school and show off their skills and their talents. They're not learning those things primarily at school at recess. They're learning them at home, and it's like, oh yeah, let's do this. We're gonna play basketball. I'm gonna cook you. I'm gonna give you 30. Like, you know what I mean? That's what the young boys be saying, right? Or we're gonna play football at recess or whatever. Watch, So, but they're practicing what they already learned, right? Math class needs to be the same way. They need to be able to walk into math class with that same confidence and that same level of understanding, so that it's like, oh yeah, let's go. Like, just like they're walking on the court or they're walking on the football field. But what has to happen in order for that to be a reality is we have to have infrastructure in place to teach parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, godparents, have them learn, the math that maybe they never learned when they were kids, or the math that they forgot. So we got to figure out, an efficient and effective way to do that, because I don't think there's any other choice we have.
Y'all got me thinking about Iverson now. Like, We talking about practice. Practice. We talking about practice.
Don't smear AI like that. Don't smear
I know.
AI.
He's a dope brother. As a matter of fact, I didn't know how dope he was until I saw some documentaries. Because if you just the
media left that out. That was a stressful time. He was going through a lot on that particular day.
That's why I think it's like important to see these documentaries, because like if you're like me and you're consuming news just through the clips, and then you go and watch a documentary, you're like, whoa, damn, how come somebody didn't tell me? And there was math in his story too, if you think about it, because we have these people that start making a lot of money and all the vultures come around, and if you're not in tune with the money, I interviewed Sheila E. And this is like one of my favorite. As a Prince fan, I was like in the middle of the podcast, like I cannot believe that I'm interviewing Sheila E. But the craziest thing about her story, I think, I can't remember the exact story, but number one, she left high school early. Here she is working on tour with Prince and going all around the world. And she had like $50 in her pocket at some point, even as she's touring the world with Prince, getting paid a lot of money and is famous and has an album out and is making money from an album. And you see at that point, math is not just a nice subject to know. Math is also a subject to help you grow and become like solvent and not get pushed around.
Right. Imagine if everybody who put out a record really knew math.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, our recording artists, this is something like, here in Minnesota, we have this school, the High School for Recording Arts, and it goes specifically looking for students that have been out of school for 2 or 3 years to bring them back in. And the recording arts process is something that does get them to come back. It's relevant to them. They want to make full albums and they want to know the process, but then they start teaching them the business of the recording industry, right? They have real people working with them. And that's the other side, oh yeah, I want to make albums. I want to like record and blah, 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 whatever. Oh, cool. Let's get you further down the pipeline now. Let's teach you about the whole industry. And that's where math will come in. Now, all of a sudden you got people that are interested in math because they need to know what their residuals and their royalties are going to be and all that type of stuff. So anyways.
And Parker, this is why, I love Chris, like when I first met him, I would tell people like, listen, I'm about to be interviewed by Chris, who interviewed Dick Gregory and Sheila E. And he wants to interview me. You know what I mean? Like, this is why,
transitive property. That's the transitive property.
I just want to tell you right now.
You interviewed Dick Gregory and Sheila E. because he interviewed them and he interviewed you.
Listen,
so you know what I'm saying? You might as well interview them.
The genealogy of it all is a beautiful thing. You know what I mean?
There you go.
I love interviewing, but in the middle of the Dick Gregory interview, he was saying things that was blowing my mind so hard, and my producer was looking them up just to make sure they were real as he was saying it, and they were real. This brother was saying the craziest stuff, and it was all true. And this is my belief. This is Dick Gregory interviewing him, creative mind. He's not just, he's a comedian and he's a civil rights person and he's a thinker and he's a deep person who has thought about health a lot. So to see somebody like that, that's Black intelligence. That's Black creativity. And when I think about math and art and science and any of these things, we have people that if we were to sit them down, they're not just people that learned a subject. There are people that are actually creative with the subject, and I think our kids need to start seeing that level of ownership and cognition of the whatever discipline it is. No, we're not just math. We're here to play. Like when you gave me that reference just now, like you should be able to walk into a math class and have it be like you're walking onto the court and be like, let's do this. I'm confident. Let's do this or whatnot at that level. Well, what would be the Michael Jordan of math then, right? Like what would be if you're walking on a court now you're confident. Not only are you confident, I'm not just confident. I'm going to smoke some of y'all, right? I'm about to smoke you, right?
And everybody, like all the young brothers and the young sisters, having that type of confidence. Like this is a friendly battle. Like this is like intellectual warfare. Like Jacob Carruthers. Like we in here, and like we're gonna bang these problems out. And if we make some mistakes, it's like all right, I'm gonna find my mistakes, and because that's another thing. Like we got to learn from our mistakes. Like I was talking to somebody the other day about how like early in my career, my classrooms were not a safe space for making mistakes because I was taught math a certain way that the only thing that mattered was the correct answer. And that's not the most beneficial way to teach math or learn math because it makes people nervous. It makes people unwilling to make mistakes. And the best way to avoid mistakes is to not even try. So you got students that won't even try to do the problem because they're like, well, if I don't even try, then I can't get it. I can't be wrong. You know what I mean? If I don't raise my hand and volunteer, then I can't say something incorrect. But if you got a classroom where like, mistakes aren't embraced and not seen as like opportunities for learning, that really could benefit everybody in the classroom, even the teacher. Like, because the student raise their hand and say something incorrect, and then the teacher might not have written. Then the teacher you got to sit there and think like, well, dang, why did they say that? Why did they arrive at that conclusion? I didn't even think about that somebody might be thinking about it that way. So let me put that in my lesson plan for next class, for the next period that comes in. And from now on, I'm gonna make sure I mention that. So that way, because you put me onto something. So I'm glad you raised your hand, even though it was a mistake. You were wrong per se, but you helped everybody. You helped the learning environment. That was an important contribution to the learning environment.
Yeah, and Chris, I just want to there are a couple of things that Akil talked about that I think is so important. And this is like when I fell in love with teaching, it was because my coaches talked about things in this way and demonstrated and modeled things in this way. A great teacher, they just, you know what I mean? Like too often our teachers are like, oh, here's my lesson plan. Here's the standard. Here's the textbook. Here's the example. But they're not fully aware, like, what mistake might a kid make? What might be, what's an easy mistake to occur? Like, what's a distraction? What's a thing that may draw them from the path to lead to the right answer? That's deep analysis. Like, that's understanding math, understanding what's behind them and what's in front of them. And all right, how long am I going to stick with this particular concept because it loops back? Or, oh, this is foundational. We're pausing everything because you got to solidify this. And then we're talking about like the decisions and choices that's constant in the teacher's mind, even before they get to the classroom. That's the beauty of it. Like, this is why they're so, when I used to talk about like the brain of a dope teacher, it's because of all of this. They can't just know what I'm teaching today. They have to know what are all the mistakes, what are all the foundational principles, what are all the tracks that have to be foundation for a kid to even teach today's lesson when there are too many people who just show up and are just teaching. And so like how this looks in a practical sense, the first school I was a principal at, it was a middle school, it was 5 through 8. And in a lot of places, 5th and 6th grade, for example, back to Akil's piece about like what students, before they get to high school, what was their foundational pieces? A lot of times that's a self-contained class, meaning there's one teacher who teaches all the subjects. So they teach history, English, math, and science. And anybody who knows this, and there, not to say there's some dope people who can do that, particularly at the lower level, but there are also tons and tons of teachers who they gravitate to their most favorite subject. And the one that they're a little bit more intimidated by, the one that they don't know in depth, they give less, instead of giving more attention to that, like as far as like their preparation, the intellectual preparation that has to occur, it becomes less like, I'll just stick this right by the textbook. The one that they feel confident, they go all in. Supplemental material, they're connecting the dots, it comes alive. And then it was the one that they don't feel as confident as Akil talked about, then that gets shortchanged. And I imagine that happening 180 days times 1st grade, times 3rd grade, times 5th grade, times 6th grade. You're talking about hundreds and hundreds of days, even if it's an hour a day of math. You're talking about like 500 days, say, 500 hours of not having what you needed in math. And now you show up in Akil's classroom at high school. So that's the part. So
we're telling Akil, fix it.
Yeah, fix it. Why aren't they passing the test?
Yeah.
And so one of the just brass tacks practical things did when I was observing, just like, oh, you know what? One of the first things it did that made a complete difference, because we were one of those schools that had very similar. We had one kid proficient, 1% proficient. Then the next year, 2%. For 5 years, when University of Penn did, showed me like the data because they had partnered with the school, it was less than 1% growth in 5 years. And so I'm just like, and I'm the 3rd principal in 6 months. And I'm like, man, 1% growth over 5 years? Because, it was nuts. One of the things that we did, hey, I noticed that you are great in like the humanities and literature. You're going to be literature and history. You're going to be math and science. So I split the class. So instead of those kids being with that same teacher all day, they had 2 teachers. Even that during that time was, it was like they looked at as radical because people weren't doing that. And I'm like, no, kids can't switch. They're too young. They're too immature. They can't go from class they can't go across. They're going downtown to the gallery, but they can't go to another class. So they looked at it as like, oh my gosh, y'all doing like different things. I didn't look at it as different things. It looked like this person is a better math teacher. Why am I going to not have the kids have access to the better math teacher?
Yeah. And that's you trying to engineer success, though. And this is the thing. If you have a belief gap, you guys know this is my thing. I care about the belief gap. We have all these different gaps: knowledge gap, achievement gap, teaching gap, leadership gap, time gap. We have all these different gaps that affect a child's achievement. And the one that's most fascinating to me is the belief gap. And I know the science behind the belief gap. Those other gaps are very pedagogical. And, I think you would do better to be an educator. But when I dug in on the belief gap, it's the one that clicked with me the most. Number one, because it's personal and I felt it in my own life. But two, it's because I know it's the thing that prevents us from seeing our children as capable. So we don't teach as hard as we should, because we walk around with negative narratives and deficit bases. And that becomes, to me, prophecy. So if you believe that from the moment that you see a child, then of course the belief gap is going to be injurious to that child, because you're not even giving them a chance to be seen as a full human being, as a learner, as a thinker, as a person with a brain that's elastic, right? And all that type of stuff. But as a parent, me myself, I had a belief gap. When I talk about the belief gap, it starts with adults. It's not that it's not teachers or whatnot. Even as parents, sometimes we have a belief gap because of our own gaps that we have in our own life. So me as a father, I become a father, right? I got all these kids now, but at one point I'm new to the game. I'm a father. I'm already carrying around this idea of my own belief gap. I don't know how to do that. I don't know what that means. Blah, blah, blah. I'm carrying it around. If somebody had showed up with me and said, listen, let me just make this simple for you. From birth to kindergarten, here are just 3 things you're going to need to pay attention to if you want them to be a math all-star one day. From kindergarten to 3rd grade, here are some things that this is that time box for you. This is to be thinking about these things. 3rd to 8th grade, be thinking about these things, whatever. Because I had that with some other issues. People would give me things on other issues that would make me know where I was at. Oh, you're in 4th grade. Okay, so this is stuff I should be doing for reading. I didn't have it for math. So someone that put a tool in my hand and said, like, I was thinking very clearly in time boxes, like, middle school and blah, blah. And middle school is when a lot of stuff gets complicated, blah, blah, whatever. So there's 2 things I would say. If someone put a resource in my hand that told me, like, what to do in the different areas as a parent, not as a teacher, just as a parent, like at home, this is the stuff you might want to be doing in these age brackets. And then the other thing is math practitioners. Sharif, you and I have talked a lot about how Cuba sent reading practitioners into the countryside and have a whole bunch of teachers. So they deputized citizens and regular people to become reading practitioners and then sent them in the countryside. And all of a sudden, Cuba's literacy rate goes up faster than the United States than anybody else does. Well, send me some math practitioners into my neighborhood, because listen, reading practitioners are great, but we know how to read more than we do. We haven't demystified math in that way. Send somebody to me nearby who's like, no, I got you. I understand this stuff, right?
And a lot of times, I think we were talking earlier about recording artists, and there's always that conversation about people not knowing how to read the contract. But what I say is, every contract, whether it's a recording contract or whether you're buying a house, is a long, extended mathematical word problem. That's really all it is. Because then, if you don't understand the mathematics behind that contract, the percentages, how much you're going to get paid for this amount of time, and what scale is or whatever, and all the terminology. If you don't understand the algebra, then that's how you get jerked. Because
you know what, Akil, you're going to tell me everything's math. You're going to tell me everything's math.
It is.
You're just going to be like, everything's math. You know when they don't put the sauce on your Big Mac? That's math. That's math.
It is, because they try to save resources. They try to save overhead.
That part. And then that goes back to this testing thing, right? Like saving resources. And I shared this with you. My sister wrote a blog about it. And when we grew up overseas, we never saw multiple choice. I didn't see it at elementary school here at the black school. And then I didn't see it all the way through middle school. I did not see a multiple choice any problem, but particularly when you're talking about math, until 10th grade in high school. I'd never seen it. And then even then, this is how crazy it is. Because again, like your mindset, like how you're trained and developed. I actually felt like yucky. I was like, oh my God, this is like cheating. Like, did they mean to get it literally felt like this shouldn't happen. Not that I'm like, I'm not brilliant, because everything was open-ended. Everything, it reminded me, because when Akil said like there was this extended word problem, it reminded me, I'm like, yeah, the word problem. It was about every day, all day. That's what we're doing. We're navigating through a bunch of word problems. That's why math is everything. Everything's a word problem, right? And so to see that and see here's how a lot of the population of the world is being developed and trained in math. And then here's how American kids, and I think part of it is even we have to work extra hard just because American exceptionalism created, more challenges for mathematical principles where everybody else uses like a decimal system. And America says, we're America, we're going to use this, right? Like, and it allows students to kind of conceptually understand math a little bit easier, where here our measurement different, everyone else uses this, right? Because it allows for the concept to get solidified at an earlier age. Now they have to understand that and then translate it back, right? Like there's even more hurdles. So that component. And I think the other part of it, like, yes, the adults, but one of my favorite teachers at that middle school I was talking about, the part of their kids' homework was the kid teaching an adult. So their kid always had homework, like prove that you taught an adult about this. Because we were like, it's so many report card cover or whatever. Oh no, dude, I can't help them. Like, we don't actually need you to help them. We just need you to create safe space, blah, 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 quiet, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And the time and to make sure they do it. And part of it, his homework ended up being like, all right, teach this concept that we went through this week. Over the weekend, you have to teach it to some adult and demonstrate how you did it and what mistake, right? Like, so right there, critical thinking, problem solving, but also you learn best when you teach someone else. So it's, again, this intergenerational component.
And I would say and I know we got to wrap soon. I think a reality with what you just said, though, Sharif, is that there's a period of time where as a father, you know everything and your child looks up to you. And your child sees you as the hero, and they see you as the all. When you walk in the room, they know there's no such thing as a monster under their bed because you're there, right?
Well, this is pre-technology, Chris.
Was it? Well, I mean, listen, there's no such thing.
I mean, your kids are. I'm saying, but your kids. I don't. Are you the expert with the technology? Just the stuff for your kids.
Well, I mean, first of all, listen, there's no such thing as pre-technology, man. Let me just go stick with that. There was always technology.
Yes.
But you're talking about ego and the male ego and the father ego in some ways here because you are your children's everything, a hero for a period of time. And for a period of time, if they're scared of anything and then you come in the room, they're scared of nothing. There's this sense of like, I am my child's everything. And then they start seeing that you don't know everything. Math would be one of those places where they give you something, they're just expecting you to know it. And you're like, oh, baby, I don't know what that is really. Like, and what? But I thought you knew everything. See, nobody wants that moment. No father wants that moment.
And,
right?
and I think there has to be, I think part of the movement has to be that we have to kind of not necessarily redefine fatherhood, but add an additional attribute to fatherhood, which is that just as we would be expected to protect our children and our children are expected to be protected by us, if it's in a physical situation, there are little girls and boys, all across the country every single day that might sit down at the table to do math homework and get so frustrated and be so emotionally overwhelmed, they might start crying or they might be about to start crying. So as a father, I think we have to, reorient ourselves to be in a position where we're like, I don't want my daughter to be crying because of math. I don't want my son to be crying because of math. I want to be able to protect them in that way. So I want to be able to sit down with them and say, listen, baby girl, or listen, youngin', I'm about to show you how to do this. You don't got to cry. It's not that deep. I got you. We about to do this together. But what that requires is the father has to know how to do it himself. So he's got to prioritize it and say, look, I want to be able to protect my children from math phobia. I want to be able to protect my children from math anxiety that will inevitably creep in, right? Because kids go to school and get hit over the head with math and they're not prepared for it. So it's inevitable that a lot of children are going to develop that phobia and that anxiety. So, but as fathers, we got to look at it as, I don't want that for my children. I want to protect them from that. I want to safeguard them from that. But so I have to learn this math. Even though math bullied me when I was little, I got to stand up to the bully and fight the bully. And we know how some situations, if you got bullied before, you might have punched the bully in the mouth and then y'all became cool. Now we friends now, So that's how a lot of people's experience with math can be. And I think that's what we have to do. A lot of fathers have to do. And I think we have to start having that conversation and popularizing and propagandizing just that idea of like, You went the same way you would protect your child from a physical bully up the block. Like your son come in the house and he crying because he talking about I got jumped, and they like whoa, like we got to go have a conversation with somebody. Like where they at? You know what I mean? Do the same thing with the math homework. The math homework has to be treated the same exact way, but we got to learn it though. Like we got to learn it. We got to prioritize it because it is that important. And there's so many dividends that get paid from us just understanding math and being able to impart that to our children. Because then, like I said earlier, then the school can be a space for practice. And then they can walk into the math class with the confidence, just like they going onto the basketball court or going onto the football field. It's all interconnected.
You just exposed what kind of elders you had, because for some people, they lock you out the house and say, go fix that.
Go fix that.
Shut the door. Oh, don't come in here crying. No. Get outside. Let me lock this door. You come back when you fix that, right? So,
or I'm going to go with Rikers you and
Island.
Observe you. Give you real-time feedback in the moment.
Listen, I said earlier, and I want to end with this. I said earlier that that the belief gap to me is one of our biggest issues, and if we could close the belief gap, we're going a long way to recovering the Black mind and the mind of our children. And it's not just the Black mind; it's for everybody. We have belief gap in young people, period, in so many ways that if we as adults can get over that, we'll be great. There was a story that came out not that long ago, and I loved it. I retweeted it. I put it out in the world. I knew there was something good about it. Just to be very honest with you, this would be one of those stories where I don't know what's really good about this. I just know it's good. And it was a story of like two Black high school students in New Orleans. I got it pulled up here. Kelsea Johnson and Nakia Jackson from New Orleans, Louisiana. They gained significant attention for solving a long-standing math problem by proving the Pythagorean theorem using trigonometry. See, all this is like, listen, y'all gonna need to use some simple English. Anyways, the Pythagorean theorem using trigonometry, a feat considered impossible by many mathematicians for over 2,000 years. They presented their findings at the American Mathematical Society Southeastern Section meeting. Two teenage students in New Orleans completed a 2,000-year-old math problem considered impossible. Y'all tell me what this means. I on a highlight level, I just told you what I think is astounding about it, but I don't know nothing about this problem. I have no idea. I just know it's good somehow.
So I'm honestly not as well versed in what they did, but I think the conversation is about because like there's proof of the Pythagorean theorem, but using algebra, which some people say is actually a type of circular logic, because which I don't really know how to explain. I should know how to explain it better, but I don't. Using trigonometry to prove it is supposed to be more efficient way to actually prove that the a squared plus b squared it actually does equal c squared. But I think one thing that it definitely does is shows that, Black people do math, because I think there's a lot of propaganda that, around us that, and is instilled in children, Black children from a young age to make them believe that Black people don't do math and Black kids don't do math. And why should I try? Because this is not something that we do. So I think stories like this can be important because then it pushes back on that narrative and it creates a more honest and, a different narrative that's actually more reflective of actual history, the objective reality of history.
I saw an interview with them and they had that affect that you talked about earlier, like the game on affect. They didn't look like, they were just two students. They looked like people that were playing at the top of their game and they were young people, whatever. Sharif, you saw the same story, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I think two parts of it that I think people should replicate. One, just like Akil talked about, it's not just white men, Europeans who did math, right? And so I think history of any content should also be included, and people should see that everybody on the globe has contributed to the canon of mathematics, but often from, and not just Black kids. If a white kid constantly is taught, white people are the only people who did math, white people invented it, white people are the only people that, white people are, right? Like, and not saying like, oh, white people learned from this group of people, and then they took some, and then they advanced it in this way, and then this group, then they, right? Like every people have shared and contributed in particular ways and built on foundations and contributed to civilization in these ways. Because yes, the black kid is all often hearing that, but also that's dangerous for a white kid too, and anybody else to constantly be told that. That's how you start planting seeds of white supremacy in a first grader's mind. It's like your people are the only ones who've done anything mathematically, and everything else is removed, and people are just oblivious to. Right, and we see that so often across the country, across the world, where people don't respect. Here's the foundation, and here's where you actually got this from. Here's where you learned from. Here's where you built on these concepts. And so I think that part. So showing that those young girls down in was it Louisiana, right? Like showing that to everybody, but also like how did they do it and what did they do? And there's still, again, back to problem solving, making sure kids are aware that there's still places for you that people think are like, are complete. Like, no, it's not complete. This is a lifelong word problem, and you have a space and a place to contribute to it.
I think that's a great place to stop. I appreciate you, brothers. None of these conversations are complete. They're always ongoing. This is like a river. So we will keep having these conversations. All the threads that we saw in here about fatherhood, about math in the classroom, but math outside of the classroom, giving our kids a more global look of what math means in their lives in a way that's relevant to the things that they care about. Like we gave the example of the high school for recording arts, but there are other ways in which this applies to people's lives where it doesn't have to be a boring classroom sit and get type of lesson styles. I love the thing about the intergenerational teaching also and getting other people involved. And I am going to stick with this idea around putting a guide into young people's hands, a father's hands, a guide of some sort that creates kind of a map so that they understand where they're at on the map, and practitioners. Math practitioners. I can't tell you how many times in my own journey as a parent, it would have been great if we would have had access to somebody that could have just came and sat down for a half hour and just like said, oh, this is what's happening here. Don't freak out, and kind of guide us to it in the way that a nurse would, like, a nurse practitioner might do. So, and to everybody else listening and watching this, please do something this month that affirms all of this knowledge, for a child. There's very simple things you could do. Number one is I'm a big fan of whenever you have a family member having a baby, buy them some books ahead of time. Or I love aunts and uncles and, who have nieces and nephews, buy them a book, buy them something that contributes to the mind. Because right now, what you talked about, Sharif, and what you've been talking about, Akil, in some ways, when you don't do this, that's mind abuse and it's child abuse. And it's not just for black kids. It's child abuse to white kids to not give them a full world fund of information about how other people in the world have contributed to the world. So this is for everybody. This is everybody. So this has been another episode of Freedom Friday, and you're still not free. As a matter of fact, you far from it, damn it. But hopefully you're freer after this hour with Akil Parker, Sharif El-Mecki, and me. And we will see you guys on the next episode. Appreciate y'all.